Are your D&D players losing interest? I suspect that that's the question on Skimmer 951's mind as he asks how to deal with lacking player engagement and commitment. Kind of like what just happened with my cat there. Since D&D is my day job, running 6 paid games per week, keeping players hooked is not just a good idea or a desire, but a financial requirement at my house. Thanks, Skimmer, for asking the question as we gain another cat, and thank you to the Tank Class supporters here on YouTube who not only get to watch this video earlier than everybody else, but choose in our Tank Class only polls what I'm going to be musing about, and decided that this was it. When it comes to getting players engaged at your table, I have 3 words for you. Pacing, pacing, pacing. It probably can't be said enough, but when it comes to getting people involved at the table, one of the things that can be a reason why our players are perhaps looking a little bit bored and leaning back is because the pace of our action doesn't change or doesn't become interesting to them except in certain situations. It's possible for players to be involved in and engaged with every aspect of play, but one of the things that escapes people is that there's not just the 3 pillars that we talk about of exploration and combat and roleplay and social choices, right? There's also another sort of overarching pillar of the pace of these encounters, the speed at which they play out, the level of tension that is involved, and essentially when it comes to creating engaging play, it's important that there's not only a rising tension that draws people in and makes them more tense about the circumstance and more excited, but also that there's a lot of alternation between the pacing. There's a book by Robin Laws, the Laws of Game Master, I think it's called, that gives a lot of great stuff it's called Hamlet's Hit Points, that gives a lot of good guidance, if you want to read through that one, on how to manage pacing and what kind of beats each individual scene feels like. But if you don't want to bother going through all of that in order to micromanage everything, just realize that when your game is slow and not full of action, you should be trying to find a way to make it fast and full of action. And when it's fast and full of action, you should be preparing yourself for the moment when that ends and gives you the opportunity to do something a little bit slower paced. By alternating the tension like that, you create a game that engages more, and overall you want your session to start reasonably low and work its way as high as you can get it, alternating back and forth, but always trending slightly more towards tension and height until you have a good opportunity for a denouement where you let it flow down to the lower points again and begin the rise again. There's a lot of great resources out there regarding pacing when it comes to video games or in movies, and most of that is semi-applicable to our tabletop role-playing games. Another reason why people don't feel engaged at the table, in my experience, is because they don't feel like they have any personal stakes. Like their character is just one of the masses that doesn't really matter, and only the primary story is important. And so something that can be done is to integrate players' backstories or characters' backstories so that the player feels like their specific character is a big part of the story. It gives them an opportunity to go on the side quests that seek after their main plot line for them personally and have that opportunity for spotlight for each individual by having them have that integrated into the story. There's not a ton of guidance on how to do this, though there is plenty of people telling you to do it, but I have recently recorded a character workshop, a backstory workshop, that might give some ideas on that topic for you. So hopefully that will be helpful. After all, that's why we recorded it. Another reason that people can lose engagement at the table is, especially in editions of Dungeons & Dragons like the 4th and 5th editions, they can feel like challenge is not really there. I think 5th edition does a better job than 4th in that players can feel fragile when they start out their careers, but at the same time, 5th edition is designed to make it so that most of the time your 5th edition group of players, the characters are not going to be the ones who lose at the table. If they don't have a lot of chance of losing, then they start to lose that feeling of tension and danger, which messes with your pacing and starts to make people feel like, well, if I can't lose, why am I even bothering rolling these dice? There's a lot of different ways to provide challenge, but the one that I think gets messed up most by DMs is that they don't realize that DM is at its core a game about resource management over time. And so if we are running plot lines and creating stories that can be resolved in a one and done encounter, then we are creating stories that are inherently boring, because those stories are challenging for us to provide a challenge to the players. It's important that we make sure that we're not just wiping them out on a regular basis and giving TPKs, but it's equally important that we are providing a challenge for the players, both in their roleplay, in their exploration, and in their combats. Since the challenge rating system can be a little bit of a challenge to utilize correctly, that gets tough for plenty of people. In fact, it's tough for everybody. As you get more experienced, it gets easier to just sort of on the fly figure out what you need. But essentially, make sure that you are providing a solid challenge at the table at all levels of play. And if you're struggling to do that, try adding more encounters into your day that can't be easily avoided and see how your players react, rather than trying to make that one encounter more powerful and TPK your group. Another reason that players can lose interest in a campaign is if they're feeling like their choices don't matter. Player agency is a pretty big buzzword when it comes to tabletop role-playing games these days. It was something that I feel like maybe even 10 years ago it wasn't even talked about. But player agency is important, and one way to ensure that player agency is being fulfilled and being available to your players is for you, as the DM, to embrace flexibility. Realize that there are going to be unexpected choices and actions that your player is going to make. They're going to have unexpected decisions and interests that are going to try to drive the narrative in a direction that you're either not prepared for or your campaign doesn't necessarily support. If you're running a module, you're almost certain to come into some period of time when your players want to zig when the adventure thinks that they're going to zag. Embrace that and enjoy that. Find ways to make that possible and allowable when it comes up, instead of trying to shut it down and push things back to the main plot. If you allow people to go on these side jaunts and investigate the things that they are interested in, and if in every direction that they look there is something to find, then your players are going to be able to be more invested in the world that you've created and in the circumstances that they have been put into. Whereas if they go off in this direction and it's just a nothing burger that tries to push them back towards the main plot every single time, eventually they're going to feel those rails that you've got them on, and they're not going to be interested anymore in going off of them when you have options for them to choose from, because they're going to assume that they don't actually have any real choice. Providing opportunities for player choice is an important and great way to get them involved and engaged. Finally, if you are having any kind of trouble when it comes to player engagement, one of the most important things that you could ever do is to realize the singular trick that works for every problem in every circumstance of your life: communicate. Talk to your players. Like, if they're not enjoying things, or if you think that they're not enjoying things, discuss what you could do to spice things up, what they enjoy the most or what they have enjoyed the least. Don't necessarily try to find out what they think will fix the problem, because we're pretty terrible indicators, and humans in general are pretty terrible at figuring out what it is that they want. but we're really good at knowing what we enjoyed recently and what we have not enjoyed. And those are great indicators. Find out what your players want, what they did enjoy, and serve more of it. Find out what they didn't want and what they didn't enjoy, and serve less of it. And if you consistently work to do that and seek that feedback and provide that adjustment, your players are going to lean in. Skimmer, I hope that this was useful for you, and I thank you very much, as always, for helping me by choosing a topic like this, and the tank class supporters for choosing this particular topic over the many other options that we have available to us. You guys help drive the narrative and decide where we're going on this channel. And if you're not a tank class supporter yet, but you'd like to have some say as to what kind of D&D content is out there for you to watch, then please consider joining them. Thanks so much for watching today, everybody, and happy adventuring.